last season, winning the Big Ten in their very first year in the conference. When you have the nationwide fan base that is the flock, there's a good reason why Oregon had 10 of their 12 regular season games played on network television last season, that being Fox, CBS, and NBC. And we're getting to the point in the offseason where these advertising upfronts are concluded, and now networks are announcing which games that they are going to carry, which college football games that they are going to carry throughout the season. So I'm like, let's bring it to TSOW. I am going to predict where every single one of Oregon's regular season games is going to end up from a television perspective, and thus a time slot perspective for a lot of these football games. Let's start first in week number 1. It's the second consecutive year that Oregon will welcome in a top 10 FCS team right off the bat. This being the defending FCS runner-up Montana State Bobcats. Now, when you think of FCS football, North Dakota State comes into mind. Now, South Dakota State comes into mind. The Montana Grizzlies in Missoula have had a lot of success over there. Shout out Washington Grizzly Stadium. Love that place. Love Missoula. But the Cats from Bozeman, I think, are starting to certainly work their way towards that conversation with the Dakota schools. Like, this is not going to be maybe a 40-point pushover in week number 1. This is a solid football team. This is a team that is certainly one of the best out there in the FCS. I think that this one is going to end up in the same type of slot that it did to begin last season. I think that this one is going to be on Big Ten Network. We could see Guy Haberman. We could see our guy Yogi Roth certainly on the call for this one. It's not very likely that when you look at the big 3 slots for the Big Ten, that a game featuring an FCS opponent would be thrown in there. Even an FCS opponent as good as Montana State. You've got Utah and UCLA. Texas, Ohio State has already been confirmed for Big Noon. Penn State has a lot of buzz. They're going to face off against the G5 team in Nevada. It would not surprise me to see this be the after dark time slot. Washington played after Oregon last year in an after dark time slot on Big Ten Network. It would, since these two teams, of course, are, I think Bozeman is in the Mountain Time Zone, of course, but since both of these teams are out west, that would not be the most surprising thing in the world. But I'm personally hoping it's prime time here in Central Time around 4 o'clock Pacific time over there. But I feel pretty comfortable in saying that week 1 is going to be on the Big Ten Network when the Ducks face the Bobcats. I have this as the only Big Ten Network game for Oregon this season. Let's move forward to week number 2. This is a very interesting matchup because this is a Big Ten on Big 12 game, and you have a Big 12 team in Oklahoma State coming into town. Like, when you look at the new Big 12, and I think when we were starting to look at, hey, who are going to be maybe some of the perennial teams that are going to be towards the top of that league. I think you thought of Utah. Kansas State has been really consistent at the top of that conference, and there are some others out there. But Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy's Cowboys, the Pokes, I think were a team that a lot of people were looking for that say, hey, they could perennially be in that conversation to head to Jerry World every single year. But you look at last year, this was a 3-9 football team, and they put up the old goose egg, winless in Big 12 games last season. But all of that being considered, Mike Gundy is still a recognizable guy. Oklahoma State is still a recognizable program and a recognizable brand. And when you look at the other games this week, the other Big 10 games, a lot of them are on ESPN properties. Michigan at Oklahoma, Illinois at Duke. Even something like UCLA at UNLV is on the road. I think Iowa State has a really good chance to be the Big Noon game that particular week. But if it's not Big Noon, that could also be an ESPN game because the Big 12 shares rights with both media companies. Like, all of that being considered, I've got Big 10 Saturday night, a primetime kickoff for the Ducks and the Cowboys. Certainly think that thing can be sold, even though the orange and black from Stillwater are maybe not the program they once were, but I've got this prime time atmosphere at Autzen Stadium there in week number 2. First road game of the year, week number 3, when Oregon heads to the banks of Lake Michigan, just yards away from the water, when they got to play in that soccer stadium at Northwestern. Now, I work in the television industry here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I have friends that work for Big Ten Network, so I've got some connections there. And here's what I will say about this small stadium and how networks kind of approach it. There is not a lot of room to bring a lot more infrastructure that the three big broadcast partners in the Big Ten want to be able to bring on. Like, this is a temporary stadium. These do not have permanent camera wells and infrastructure and cabling and stuff like that a lot of these established stadiums has. Like Fox, CBS, NBC, those bigger broadcasts, I don't think they want to come to do a game at Northwestern. So you're going to see a little bit of a smaller scale. Like BTN, I thought was a possibility here. Like the biggest network that Northwestern played on last year was FS1. Like they played Ohio State. I think that was in Wrigley Field still, but they played Ohio State on Big Ten Network last year. I think all because of that, I think this is going to be a smaller scale broadcast. I got this one on Peacock. I got this one being the lone Peacock exclusive stream over here. It's the Big Ten debut, it's the Big Ten opener for the Ducks going on the road to the Wildcats over there. So I think this could be certainly very interesting, but this has kind of a Big Ten Network or Peacock vibe to it. There should be no night games at this Northwestern Stadium. The sun glistens off the lake at Lake Michigan. It is a beautiful scene over there. So my hope is that this is like something like a mid-afternoon. I'm hoping to be at this game this fall. Let's head over and talk about week number 4, the rivalry game, Oregon and Oregon State in the Civil War. I've got this one in the 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific time slot on CBS, and I'm going to tell you why. When you look at that week, it has already been confirmed. Washington will play at Washington State in primetime on CBS. Now, I think that there's certainly other slots where this game could be, but I think that they're going to look to stack rivalry game on top of rivalry game over there on CBS. I think that would be really cool for those 4 Pacific Northwest schools to be able to have it on the same network. I think that's very, rivalries. It's interesting that some of these rivalries are starting to go away in college football. There's been rumors about USC and Notre Dame possibly not extending past this upcoming season. Oregon State is one of those that don't really have an extended contract for the future. We're hoping, I think, that this rivalry does continue in this non-conference capacity, but I think having the Civil War and the Apple Cup back-to-back is something I think CBS would certainly want to package together. All right, here's the big one. Week number 5, and this one maybe has a little bit of whispers in the wind attached to it. Oregon and Penn State. I've got this one as a whiteout in Happy Valley on Big Ten Saturday night. And maybe this is a little bit of a speaking it into existence a little bit, but we've already seen Texas and Ohio State has been picked by Fox. Ohio State and Michigan already has been picked by Fox. I think some of these other top picks by CBS and NBC, this is going to be their top one. Now, NBC, of course, got that Ohio State-Oregon game, which was really the top game to be picked last season. If it is CBS this year, I'm curious how hard they go after the Ohio State-Penn State game, and then this one might fall into NBC. So I could see this Oregon and Penn State game being a CBS game if they have the number 1 pick. But this is going to be certainly one of the top picks out there as well. But man, what an atmosphere that would be. That would be a really difficult atmosphere for this young talent with only 4 games under their belt going into a whiteout against an experienced Penn State football team. But I think like Oregon fans moving to the Big Ten, I think a lot of things they've said is like, hey, we want to really experience these unique atmospheres in the Big Ten. There is no more unique atmosphere, certainly, than a whiteout in Happy Valley. Ducks have a bye in week number 6, so let's advance to week number 7. Both Oregon and Indiana are going to be coming off of a bye here. And, when I look, there's some other games. Like, this is a pretty good weekend of Big Ten football. You've got Iowa and Wisconsin. That's a rivalry game. Michigan at USC. That was a really good game in Ann Arbor last year. Ohio State going on the road to an Illinois team that's getting a lot of expectations out there. But I think like what you have with Indiana, I think at worst Indiana is going to be 3-2. They're going to be coming off of games against Illinois and Iowa. I think there's a chance that they split them. I think that there's a chance that this is a ranked versus ranked matchup. And like if you want offense, you want some points on the board, you want good quarterback play, you want explosive wide receivers, big plays down the field. Like these are two offenses that can certainly provide that. Of course, you have the story that was Indiana. This is kind of their first game against one of the powers of the Big Ten since last year. Of course, Ohio State and Notre Dame and their losses a season ago. But that was the big thing with Indiana. They didn't play a lot of these teams. Going into Autzen Stadium, both teams kind of coming off of significant battles. Certainly, I think there's a lot to be said here. And I've got this one ended up in the 12:30 Pacific time slot over on CBS. Let's move forward to week number 8. Now, this is where Oregon goes on the road all the way across the country to Rutgers. The Ducks played in 3 Friday night games last year. I don't think they're going to play in as many Friday night games this season, but here's what I will say about Rutgers. Like, you've got some pretty good games that week to be able to choose from for your Saturday Fox, CBS, and NBC, like Penn State at Iowa, Washington at Michigan, USC and Notre Dame is already confirmed for the primetime slot over there. So I think putting this game on a Friday night fits in with the tradition that Rutgers is trying to establish. The last few years, they've had a blackout atmosphere. It is an underrated one-game type of atmosphere. At least that's the way it appears in television. I've never been there in the Big Ten Conference and maybe in all of college football. It gets pretty rocking in there. But a Friday night across the country in Piscataway under the lights, that's where I've got this one, in that Fox Friday night time slot. A lot of people are pegging this game as like a Wisconsin, like we're the 16-13 rock fight type of game. I don't see it. I still think Oregon can win this game, even though it might be a little bit tougher with the atmosphere and all that on a Friday night in a short week. I think Oregon is still much, much, much more talented than Rutgers. I think there's another game later on in the season on the schedule that could be a little bit more rock fighty than this one. But I've got this as the only Friday night game, and maybe I'm speaking this into existence because as it stands right now, I'm scheduled to go, I know, I'm scheduled to go to a wedding on this Saturday. So having the game on Friday certainly might help me out a little bit more. Let's move over to week number 9 when the Wisconsin Badgers, the Ted LaRue Bowl here, the Wisconsin Badgers come into Autzen to face Oregon. Of course, Oregon went on the road late in November to Camp Randall last year. I think at this point in time, like I think Wisconsin is in like the bottom quarter of the Big Ten talent-wise. I think they're going to start to fade. I think at best they're sitting with a 4-3 record at this point in the season if they beat Iowa. Personally, I think they're probably going to be sitting somewhere at 3-4. And there's some other games on the slate this week that could be a little bit juicy. Illinois and Washington, rivalry games, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota and Iowa. What if Nico and UCLA are lighting it up? They go on the road to Indiana. Like, they think there's some other games certainly in there. Oregon did not play on FS1 last season. I think that this is like your typical mid-afternoon secondary FS1 type of game. I think networks are going to look at this game in the week-by-week picks and say, well, Wisconsin, this is not going to be a close game, especially at Autzen Stadium. This is not going to be ultra competitive, and I think there's a lot of other games during that given week that could be competitive. Even though Oregon will probably be the highest ranked team out of those teams available, I think that this one slides to the FS1 slot over there. Let's get into the month of November. This is a sneakily difficult month of November for the Oregon Ducks, and it starts off with what could be a rockin' atmosphere in Iowa City. Now, I think a lot of people are looking at the whiteout, say, hey, if I'm an Oregon fan, I live on the West Coast, I'm looking to go to a Big Ten venue, I'm looking to fly out to the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, to take in that whiteout. If this Iowa game is where at the time slot I predict it to be, which is Big Ten Saturday night, don't sleep on Kinnick Stadium, one of the most underrated stadiums in all of college football. NBC loves going to Iowa. In 2023, they went there once, but they went there 4 times for a night game last season. I think they recognize what type of atmosphere this can really do and how it can really pop on television, certainly. This is a highly anticipated November game. Indiana and Penn State is likely big noon. I think this was maybe one that could be a candidate for the big noon slot for Oregon, a 9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff, but I've got this one on Big Ten Saturday night. This is kind of that tough rock fight type of game. That's the way Iowa plays. They pump the ball, they play field position. This could be one where it's got like 20-13 written all over it. They turn around and play a good Minnesota team at Autzen Stadium. I think when people are looking at teams that maybe could surprise in this conference, people are looking over the Golden Gophers of Minnesota. If they can kind of figure out this quarterback thing, this could be a really, really good team. I think that this could be a ranked versus ranked matchup a little bit later on during the season. There's not a ton of other potential marquee matchups on the schedule. So I've got this one in that 12:30 p.m. Pacific time slot over there on CBS. Now, Minnesota had a home game late in the season against Penn State, also on CBS, where they pushed the Nittany Lions all the way to the brink, but that one was in Minneapolis. I've got back-to-back CBS games as we look forward to the most anticipated game of the season at Autzen Stadium, that is USC. So I've got USC also, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time on CBS. I think that this is a sneakily really good, high-level, maybe TV draft pick for the networks. Of course, LA is a big-time market. Oregon has that big-time fan base. Like, USC is a team where if they can really put things together under Lincoln Riley this season, hey, maybe they lose to Illinois, maybe they, like Illinois or Michigan, they lose to Notre Dame in the middle of the year, and maybe they take care of business in some of these other games. This could be a game with playoff implications. I think there's no doubt that this is going to be a CBS game or an NBC game, but I kind of put it in the mid-afternoon. This is also one little bit of a tease here that I might be headed to as well. Finishing off the season, of course, with the Washington Huskies, this one on the road in Seattle. I've got it in the same time slot as last season on Big Ten Saturday night. A lot of good night type of atmospheres on the road at Washington, on the road at Iowa, on the road at Penn State. There's going to be some difficult environments to play in, certainly, for the Ducks this season. Now, Washington is a team where I can think like, oh, they could win like 7 or 8 type of games. I mean, they've got good players on offense, but they don't have the complete team that I think Oregon has right now. We know Michigan and Ohio State is going to be the big noon game. USC and UCLA could very well be the CBS game. Remember, USC and Notre Dame was the CBS game this past year. So I think they end up on NBC in the final game of the season there in Husky Stadium. Last time they were in the Husky Stadium didn't exactly work out so well, so they're hoping to get revenge. I've got 4 games on CBS, 4 games on NBC, a game on Fox, a game on FS1, a game on Big Ten Network, and a game on Peacock. The only Big Ten property that Oregon would not be playing in is Big Noon Kickoff and Big Noon Saturday. So lots of diversity in my 2025 Oregon TV predictions.